There is a cultural superstructure through which this recognition dawns in inefficient ways. These cultural lags and distortions are a nuisance, so that it is easy to pass from this to some theory of substitution. The party, sect, or theorist who disclose class consciousness not as it is, but as it ought to be. But a similar error is committed daily on the other side of the ideological divide. In one form, this is a plain negative. Since the crude notion of class attributed to Marx can be faulted without difficulty, it is assumed that any notion of class is a pejorative theoretical construct, imposed upon the evidence. It is denied that class has happened at all. In another form, and by a curious inversion, it is possible to pass from a dynamic to a static view of class. It, the working class, exists, and can be denned with some accuracy as a component of the social structure. Class consciousness, however, is a bad thing, invented by displaced intellectuals, since everything which disturbs the harmonious coexistence of groups performing different social roles, and which thereby retards economic growth, is to be deplored as an unjustified disturbance symptom. The problem is to determine how best it can be conditioned to accept its social role, and how its grievances may best be handled and channeled. If we remember that class is a relationship and not a thing, we cannot think in this way. It does not exist, either to have an ideal interest or consciousness, or to lie as a patient on the adjuster's table. Nor can we turn matters upon their heads, as has been done by one authority who, in a study of class obsessively concerned with methodology, to the exclusion of the examination of a single real class situation in a real historical context, has informed us. Classes are based on the difference in legitimate power associated with certain positions, i.e. on the structure of social roles, with respect to their authority expectations. An individual becomes a member of a class by playing a social role relevant from the point of view of authority. He belongs to a class because he occupies a position in a social organization. In other words, class membership is derived from the incumbency of a social role. The question, of course, is how the individual got to be in this social role, and how the particular social organization, with its property rights and structure of authority, got to be there. And these are historical questions. If we stop history at a given point, then there are no classes, but simply a multitude of individuals with a multitude of experiences. But if we watch these men over an adequate period of social change, we observe patterns in their relationships, their ideas, and their institutions. Class is defined by men as they live their own history. And in the end, this is its only definition. If I have shown insufficient understanding of the methodological preoccupations of certain sociologists, nevertheless, I hope this book will be seen as a contribution to the understanding of class. For I am convinced that we cannot understand class unless we see it as a social and cultural formation, arising from processes which can only be studied as they work themselves out over a considerable historical period. This book can be seen as a biography of the English working class, from its adolescence until its early manhood. In the years between 1780 and 1832, most English working people came to an identity of interests as between themselves, and as against their rulers and employers. This ruling class was itself much divided, and in fact only gained in cohesion over the same years, because certain antagonisms were resolved, or faded into relative insignificance, in the face of an insurgent working class. Thus, the working class presence was, in 1832, the most significant factor in British political life. The book is written in this way. In Part 1, I consider the continuing popular traditions in the 18th century, which influenced the crucial Jacobin agitation of the 1790s. In Part 2, I move from subjective to objective influences, the experiences of groups of workers during